Hey guys, okay, so if you missed video 7, check it out. This is going to be video 8. I wanted to dedicate like an hour today with reading this book to you guys. So far we've got like 31 minutes down. And preferably there's no system update, but my phone is going dead. It's on 14%. So I'm just going to read as much as possible, guys, but preferably you guys are appreciative of my efforts to read this book with you guys, and for it to just be a blessing in your marriage, in your relationship, in your life. So let's jump back into this, guys. We did a recap kind of what we talked about, what we're going to be reading, continuing on with the book. We read also strategy 1, and now we're on strategy 2, which is choose a winning attitude. So I'm just going to dive into this. Most athletes would agree that winning is 90% attitude and 10% hard work. If that is true in the world of sports, it is certainly also true in the world of relationships. Spring and summer marriages are created and sustained by positive attitudes. Fall and winter marriages are characterized by negative attitudes. What we think largely influences what we do. In turn, our actions greatly influence our emotions. This connection between attitude and actions opens the door of hope for all couples. If we can change our thinking, we can change the season of our marriage. The most common mistake couples make is allowing negative emotions to dictate their behavior. By failing to recognize the power of a positive attitude, they fail to achieve their marriage's highest potential. We have long recognized the power of a positive attitude in the business arena. Consider the attitudes of two different salespeople. One thinks these people need a vacuum cleaner. I have the best one on the market, and if I can show it to them, I know they will want it, and I can help them find a way to get it. The other one thinks these people will not be interested in buying a vacuum cleaner. They have too many other things on their minds. Besides that, they couldn't afford one if they wanted it. Which salesperson is more likely to succeed? In this chapter, I want to help you develop your potential for positive thinking, which will lead you to greater marital success. I must confess that I learned this strategy the hard way. Earlier in my marriage, I spent a great deal of time in the winter season because of my negative attitudes. And when I was in the midst of winter, I found it hard to admit that my attitude was part of the problem. It was much easier to blame Carolyn's behavior for our poor marriage. Today, I readily admit that my negative thinking was the culprit. If you are living in the fall or winter season of marriage, my guess is that you too have the tendency to blame your spouse and are failing to recognize your own negative attitudes. If you want to break free from the coldness and bitterness of winter, I challenge you to devour the truth in this chapter. Changing your attitude can be a catalyst that sets in motion a seasonal change for your marriage. Circumstances are neutral, or at least they're common. Therefore, it is not what happens to us, but how we interpret what happens to us, our attitude, that makes the difference between success and failure. Let me show you the difference in the lives of two couples, Betsy and Kirk and Charles and Kelly. Betsy and Kirk had been married 12 years when they experienced the death of their 9-year-old son. Guys, bear with me 1 second, please. I'm so sorry. Something just went in my eye. Okay, they experienced the death of their 9-year-old son. Wow. He was killed instantly by an automobile as he rode his bicycle from the driveway into the street. Jesus. In my first conversation with Betsy, which occurred less than 6 hours after the accident, I discovered the seeds of blame. She said, I had just told Kirk last week that he needs to spend more time with Andrew, talking with him about safety rules for riding his bicycle. If Kirk had talked with him, maybe this would not have happened. Later, in talking with Kirk, I sensed a similar attitude. I have never liked this place, he said. I told Betsy 2 years ago that I wanted us to get a little farm. I don't like raising kids in the city. It's too dangerous. I wish I had listened to my heart. 2 months later, in another conversation, I found Kirk rehearsing the same message again. I just wish we would have moved to the farm 2 years ago. Betsy resisted the idea. She said it was so much more convenient in the city, but there is more to life than convenience. The following week, I met with Betsy and found that she too had been playing the same message in her mind for 2 months. If only Kirk had talked to Andrew about safety rules, maybe Andrew would still be with us. Betsy was blaming Kirk and Kirk was blaming Betsy. They would not have said it directly to one another, but their attitudes revealed the truth. I wish I could say that through counseling, Kirk and Betsy changed their attitudes and found comfort and hope. The reality is that in less than a year they were separated and shortly thereafter divorced, creating additional pain for their other two sons, ages 5 and 7. Negative attitudes led to negative behavior, which ended in bitterness and divorce. Charles and Kelly experienced a very similar tragedy. The words this morning. I'm sorry, guys. A very similar tragedy, but with very different results. Andrea, their 7-year-old daughter, drowned in the backyard pool while both parents were in the house. Charles and Kelly were planning to join Andrea for a swim, but she jumped in before they arrived. She was a good swimmer, Kelly said, and she had never gone into the pool without our being there. That was one of our rules. I don't know what happened. I had several sessions with Kelly and Charles over the next 6 months. Never once did I hear them blame each other, and never once did they blame Andrea. She was just being a child, Kelly said with tears coursing down her cheeks. No need to blame her for breaking our buddy rule. It won't bring her back. Deeply pained, Charles and Kelly talked their way through their grief, gave each other the freedom to cry, held each other tenderly, and survived the ordeal with an even stronger marriage. We had a good marriage, Charles said, but the loss of Andrea has brought us even closer together. We know we can't bring her back, but we can go to be with her. We want to be good parents to our son and trust God with the future. In the years since Andrea's death, Charles and Kelly have gone on to live fruitful, productive lives. God gave them 2 additional children, whom they are rearing in a very nurturing home. The difference between the 2 couples was basically a difference in attitude. Both were deeply hurt. Both suffered tragic loss. One couple chose an attitude of blame, whereas the other couple chose an attitude of acceptance and support. Attitude made all the difference. God gave us Andrea, and we had her for 7 wonderful years. Charles said, she brought us great joy, and now she's in the presence of God. She loved Jesus. We loved her, and we know we will see her again someday. We know that she would not want us to sit around grieving her death for the next 20 years. As long as God gives us life, we want to be faithful in loving and caring for our other children and serving God. As Charles tried to summarize their attitude, Kelly was nodding her head affirmingly. Together, they were demonstrating the power of a positive attitude in the midst of tragedy. A Christian worldview, that is, a biblical perspective on life, makes it much easier for couples to have a positive mental attitude. Perhaps you are asking, what is this Christian worldview that fosters such a positive attitude? Let me mention some of the characteristics. First is the recognition that every human being is made in the image of God and is therefore extremely valuable. Second, each person is uniquely gifted by God, including the mentally and physically challenged. Before I get on the third one, guys, I want to read this box to you guys. So, characteristics of a Christian worldview. Every human being is made in the image of God and is therefore extremely valuable. Every person is uniquely gifted by God, including the mentally and physically challenged. Each person is uniquely gifted by God, including the mentally and physically challenged. Each person has a unique role to play in life. Marriage is God's ideal. Husbands and wives are intended to complement each other. The object of marriage is to glorify God by serving one's spouse and helping the spouse reach his or her God-given potential. So I'm going to keep reading. Third, each person has a unique role to play in life. Fourth, marriage is God's ideal. Thus, a man and woman are uniquely created to work together as a team. Each has strengths and weaknesses. Each is called upon to complement the other. If they learn how to do this, they will accomplish more than they would ever have accomplished as individuals. Fifth, the goal of marriage is that husbands and wives voluntarily serve each other, helping each other reach their potential for God and promoting good in the world. When I meditate on these 5 truths, I'm drawn to a positive attitude toward Carolyn, my wife. My attitude is not based on her behavior, but on my beliefs about who she is and about my role in her life. Looking back on the various winter seasons of my marriage, I realized that my attitude during those times was not one of positive regard for Carolyn. Instead, I focused on what I considered to be her weaknesses. Hurt or irritated by the things she said or left unsaid, annoyed by the things she did or failed to do, I found myself thinking the worst kind of thoughts about her and mentally blaming her for our poor relationship. In my counseling practice, I have since discovered how common that destructive pattern of thinking is. One example is Marilyn from Kansas City, who has been married to Bruce for 29 years. She indicated that she was definitely in a winter marriage. I feel unloved and angry, she said. How did you arrive at this season of marriage, I asked. We arrived here because of my husband's work. His job during parts of the year is demanding and requires lots of hours, so he is away from home most of the day. During these times, I become the head of the household, taking care of the boys and the finances. Also, he becomes distant. We don't have much communication. This has happened a lot during our 29 years of marriage, and I would like to stop the cycle. The good news is that Marilyn can stop the cycle. It begins by changing her attitude toward her husband. He is obviously a hardworking man bringing home the bacon. And by Marilyn's own testimony, he has never been sexually unfaithful to her. These are admirable traits. But Bruce has obviously not met Marilyn's emotional need for love and companionship. That is why she considers her marriage to be in the winter season. Without realizing it, Marilyn has been sabotaging her marriage with a negative attitude. She has allowed the emotions of hurt, anger, and feelings of neglect to control her behavior toward Bruce. She has been verbally critical of him and the time he spends on the job, often saying such things as, "You let the company take advantage of you. You don't make any extra money for all the hours you invest. You ought to demand that they pay you more." On other occasions, she has focused on his neglect of the children. How do you expect to have a positive influence on our boys when you don't spend any time with them? The fact that Bruce played ball with the boys every Sunday afternoon and sometimes took them on business trips with him was overlooked in Marilyn's verbal tirades. Bruce's attitude was also affected. "I don't ever do anything right," he said. "No matter what I do, it's never enough, so I've quit trying to please her. I tune her out when she gets into her long speeches. I just wish the boys didn't have to live in such a negative household." Bruce is also focusing on Marilyn's weaknesses and ignoring her strengths. The hours she spends tending to the household and helping the boys with homework are in the back of his mind, but what occupies his attention and guides his thinking are his focus on her angry lectures. All this could change if Bruce and Marilyn would choose a winning attitude. At the moment, they are continuing to perpetuate the winter season of marriage by their negative thinking toward each other. And guys, I'm going to stop because my phone is extremely hot in my hand. That means it's going super dead. So I'm going to put this phone down and just upload what we have. When we continue on in our next video with this Lord's Will, we're going to continue about breaking the cycle of negativity. So we'll move into that. And we'll keep reading about choosing a winning attitude. And then prayerfully, we'll be able to finish strategy 2 and get into strategy 3, which is learn to speak your spouse's love language. But I pray that y'all were blessed by today's videos and by these videos. You guys have a great day. Thanks for joining.